Okay, so let me start. If you remember, in the last class I have started discussing about the pharynx, right? That I have written some points also. Okay, that how to proceed with the pharynx, what exactly you have to study in the pharynx. Okay, do you remember those points? First, if you remember, we have discussed about the extent of the pharynx. Okay, so pharynx is a what is the shape of the pharynx? It is tubular shape. Okay, but is the diameter same in each and every part? No. Upper part is wider, lower part is narrower. Okay, and the pharyngo-esophageal junction, it is the narrowest. Next, so that is the extent. Now, what is the dimension? What is the length approximately? What will be the length of the pharynx approximately? 15 centimeter. Okay, it is 15 centimeter. Then we have seen the diameter also in the upper part. For example, in the nasopharyngeal part, the diameter is approximately 3.5 centimeter. As you can see over here, as you go downwards, the diameter decreases. Okay, at the lowest is only 1.5 centimeter. Okay, so that is the dimension. Next, we have discussed the extent of the pharynx from where to where it is extending. As you can see in the diagram, it is extending from the base of the skull to the lower border of the cricoid cartilage at the level of 6 cervical vertebra. Beyond that, it continues as esophagus. Okay. Next, how many subdivisions are there in the pharynx? How many subdivisions? 3 subdivisions are there. Okay. So, as you can see in the diagram, this is the nasopharynx, this is the oropharynx, and this is the laryngopharynx. Now, before going to the subdivision, in the last class I have discussed about the boundaries, overall boundary. Okay, so in the overall boundary, first we have seen what is present superiorly, what is present inferiorly, anteriorly, posteriorly, and laterally, both the side. Okay, those things were done. Then for each and every division, separate boundaries are there. Okay, for each and every division, so 3 subdivisions are there. Okay, for each and every subdivision, boundaries will be different. Followed by in each and every subdivision, the most important part is what are the features present. Okay, and how you will study the feature or how you will write the features. Whenever you are mentioning about the features, for example, if you are writing the features of nasopharynx, okay, can anyone tell me any 1 or 2 features of the nasopharynx? So, in order to know the features, you have to go according to the boundaries. That what is present on the lateral wall, what is present on the superior wall. Okay, like this. According to the boundary, you have to know about the features. Okay, a brief revision, whatever we have done that day. If you see the nasopharynx, okay, on the junction of superior wall and the posterior wall, a collection of lymphoid tissues are there. That is called as pharyngeal tonsil or nasopharyngeal tonsil. Okay, that we have discussed that day. Along with that, we have discussed pharyngeal bursa. Okay. Then on the lateral wall of the nasopharynx, a very important opening is there. It is the opening of the auditory tube. Okay, which is connecting the nasopharynx to the middle ear cavity. Then the tubal tonsil, the elevation just above the auditory opening. Then 2 folds of the mucous membrane. Okay. So these are the features. Okay. So please study the features of the pharynx according to the walls, according to the boundaries. जैसे मान लो इंटीरियर वॉल है तो उसमें कौन सा फीचर्स रहेगा, लेटरल वॉल है तो उसमें कौन सा फीचर्स है, लाइक दिस. बेटर मेक ए लिस्ट. जैसे मान लो nasopharynx है, व्हाट आर द फीचर्स प्रेजेंट इन द nasopharynx, मेक ए लिस्ट. Okay, and then see in which wall which features are present and then study. Okay. Don't mix. See, repeatedly I am telling you guys, this time I think next week you are having exam. Okay, in the exam suppose question comes that describe the divisions of the pharynx. While writing, if you don't mention whatever I am discussing right now, don't expect marks, okay, to score good marks, okay. Because those are the points which must be there whenever you are writing about the divisions of the pharynx, boundaries, and along with that features. Whenever you are writing the features, you have to be specific that in which wall which features are present. Okay, so in the last class, if you remember, we have discussed up to the oropharyngeal isthmus. The oropharyngeal isthmus is a feature of which pharynx? Which part of the pharynx? Very good. You are not studying anything, wasting your time. It is a feature of oropharynx. Okay, and then I have shown you the boundaries also. If you remember, the boundaries of the oropharynx. Oropharyngeal isthmus. This is the boundary of the oropharyngeal isthmus. Okay, and this oropharyngeal isthmus is a feature of oropharynx. Can anyone tell me what is this oropharyngeal isthmus? Less than 1 week left for your upcoming exam, and this is your condition. Anyway, so 3 subdivisions are there. First we have discussed about the nasopharynx, then about the oropharynx. Next is the laryngopharynx. Okay, laryngopharynx is also called as hypopharynx. Now I will request you in this diagram. Okay, now if you see the diagram, so these parts already we have done. Now we are in the laryngopharynx. Okay, so we will be discussing about the laryngopharynx. Okay, this part, this one, laryngopharynx. Okay, so what do you have to know about the laryngopharynx? First of all, the extent of the laryngopharynx, from where to where it is extending. Okay, as you can see, it is extending from the upper border of the epiglottis to the lower border of the cricoid cartilage below. That is the extent of the laryngopharynx. Okay, and it is supported by cervical vertebrae, lower cervical vertebrae, which you can see in the diagram. The lower cervical vertebrae are supporting the laryngopharynx. Okay, next if you see the wall, so it is having an anterior wall and it is having posterior wall also. Okay, so this part will be anterior aspect, this is the posterior aspect. So if you see the anterior wall, first of all it is made up of laryngeal inlet. Okay, as you can see over here, it is made up of laryngeal inlet. So this is the laryngeal inlet which is forming the anterior wall. Okay, and followed by the cricoid. So this is the anterior wall which is formed by the laryngeal inlet, and the posterior wall of the larynx is forming the anterior wall of the laryngopharynx. Okay. Next, if you go posteriorly, then it is supported by the bodies of C3, C4, C5, C6 vertebra. Okay, these are present posteriorly. So this will be the posterior boundary. This will be the anterior boundary. Okay. So we have seen anterior and posterior boundary. Next, what will be the lateral boundary on either side? Okay, we will be getting the thyroid cartilage. So it is passing through the thyroid cartilage. Okay. So you can see over here. So the lateral wall is supported by thyroid cartilage and the thyroid membrane that is present on the either side. So these are the boundaries of laryngopharynx. So laryngopharynx का boundary is very simple. We are having anterior wall, posterior wall, okay, and lateral walls. Lateral walls are mainly formed by the thyroid cartilage and the thyroid membrane. Okay, and anterior wall already I have shown you this particular part starting from the laryngeal inlet and the posterior border, or you can say posterior wall of the larynx will form the anterior wall. And these are the cervical vertebrae C3, C4, C5, C6, which is forming the posterior wall of the laryngopharynx. Okay. Now laryngopharynx below the cricoid cartilage, it is continuing as esophagus. Okay. Next, so boundaries are done. Next will be the features. So what are the features present in the laryngopharynx? Only 2 features are there. Okay, and those features are present on the anterior wall and the lateral wall. Okay, so which feature is present in the anterior wall? That is the laryngeal inlet. That means inlet for the laryngeal cavity. Okay, till now I know you have not studied about the larynx. Okay, you will be studying about the larynx. At that time you will come to know the laryngeal inlet. Through the laryngeal inlet we can go into the laryngeal cavity. Okay, so 2 features are there. On the anterior wall we are getting the laryngeal inlet, and lateral wall we are getting the pyriform fossa. So see, this is the laryngeal inlet, okay, and on the either side of the laryngeal inlet pyriform fossa is present, okay. Do you remember about the pyriform fossa? This pyriform fossa in brief we have discussed during the time of soft palate, if you remember, okay. So in laryngopharynx or hypopharynx only two features are there, important features, okay, that is one on the anterior wall and on the lateral walls. Anterior wall में क्या रहता है? Laryngeal inlet, okay, that means it will go inside the laryngeal cavity, and laryngeal inlet का दोनों side में, on both the side of the laryngeal inlet we are getting a sinus, that is also called as pyriform fossa, okay. And you can see in the diagram. Now the laryngeal, though the laryngeal inlet is present, that means it will be having some boundaries. So you have to understand the boundaries of the laryngeal inlet. Okay. So this is the diagram. As you can see, this is the diagram showing the laryngeal inlet. Okay. Now through the laryngeal inlet, you can go inside the larynx. If you go inside the larynx, then you can see different structures present inside the larynx. For example, vocal cords are there. Okay. And if you see below the vocal cords, okay, then after that you can see the tracheal rings also. Now how the laryngeal inlet is formed? It is bounded above, okay, and in front by the margin of the epiglottis, okay. So as you can see, this is the epiglottis. So it is bounded above in front by the upper margin of the epiglottis. So this is the upper margin of the epiglottis, which is forming the boundaries above and in front, okay, and below and behind it is formed by two folds of mucous membrane, that is the interarytenoid fold and aryepiglottic fold, okay. So like this the boundaries are formed above and in front, okay, and then you can see below and behind, that is the boundary. So how it is covered? If you see above and in front, what is present? Upper border or upper margin of the epiglottis, as you can see, okay. So this particular part, so this is the inlet, okay. So inlet का ऊपर वाला part और सामने वाला part is formed by epiglottis, okay. नीचे वाला part and जो पीछे वाला part है, that is formed by the interarytenoid fold. This is the interarytenoid fold and this is the aryepiglottic fold, okay. These are the aryepiglottic fold and interarytenoid fold. Now a very important muscle is present deep to the aryepiglottic fold. It is called aryepiglotticus muscle. Okay. See, aryepiglotticus muscle, which is present deep to this aryepiglottic fold. Now it is present over here also, and it is present over here also on both the sides. Now when there is contraction of the aryepiglotticus muscle, what it will do? It will close the laryngeal inlet, and that takes place during the time of swallowing. Very important, okay. जो aryepiglotticus muscle है दोनों साइड में, when the swallowing is taking place, at that time it will get contracted, okay, and it will close the laryngeal inlet, so that whatever we are swallowing, it will not go into the larynx. अगर larynx में गया तो क्या होगा? What will happen? Suppose if you are swallowing something, ठीक है, at that time instead of laryngopharynx, if it goes to the larynx, then what will happen? From larynx it will go to the trachea. Choking will be there, okay. So that should not take place. That's why the laryngeal inlet is closed, okay, whenever we are swallowing something. So that is also a very important phenomenon, okay. So that is a important feature in the laryngopharynx. Next, another feature on the lateral wall, that is the pyriform fossa, okay. Another important feature, that is the pyriform fossa. So what is the pyriform fossa? As I said, on the either side of the laryngeal inlet. So I have shown you the laryngeal inlet right now. ये देखो, this is the laryngeal inlet, okay. On the either side of the laryngeal inlet, here you can see on the either side of the laryngeal inlet, I hope you can see a sinus is present, okay. That is the pyriform recess or pyriform fossa, ठीक है. जो laryngeal inlet होता है, उसका दोनों साइड में both right and left side, a sinus is there. Okay, that is called pyriform recess or pyriform fossa. Okay, now if you see the shape of the pyriform fossa, it is broad above and narrow below. ऊपर वाला जो part है it is broad, नीचे वाला जो part है that is narrow. Okay, and this recess, how it is formed? It is formed by the bulging of larynx into the laryngopharynx. Okay, bulging of laryngeal cavity into the laryngopharynx is taking place. That's why we are getting these recesses. Okay. Now this recess is also having certain boundaries, medial boundary and lateral boundary, and along with that there is a very important relation, okay, of this particular recess. So let me show you the diagram. Yeah. So here you can see the pyriform recess. Okay. So this is the pyriform fossa. This is the pyriform fossa. So what are the boundaries? So which will be the medial boundary? Which will be the lateral boundary? This is the medial boundary, and this is the lateral boundary. So if you see the medial boundary, it is formed by the artery-epiglottic fold. Okay, artery-epiglottic fold of the mucous membrane. And if you go laterally, then you can see the thyrohyoid membrane. This is the thyrohyoid membrane. In between this, the pyriform fossa is situated. Okay. Now just below the pyriform fossa, can you see a nerve is traveling? Concentrate on the diagram. See, a nerve is passing. Okay. So this is the internal laryngeal nerve. Okay. So internal laryngeal nerve is a branch of vagus nerve. Actually, it is a branch of superior laryngeal nerve which divides into external and internal laryngeal nerve. Now, this internal laryngeal nerve, along with the superior laryngeal vessels, will pierce the thyrohyoid membrane. As you can see, it is piercing the thyroid membrane, and it is going just below the fossa, pyriform fossa. Okay. So what is the significance of this particular part? Now, if any foreign object is lodged, okay, into the pyriform fossa, suppose you are eating fish, or suppose something where bones are present, okay, it may lodge into the pyriform fossa. Okay. Now if anything is lodged in the pyriform fossa, you can't take out. Okay, it has to be taken out surgically. So during that procedure, what will happen? There may be chances of damage of this internal laryngeal nerve. अगर internal laryngeal nerve damage हुआ, then what will happen? It is supplying the, it is completely a sensory nerve, okay, which supplies the supraglottic part of the larynx. Supraglottic part मतलब जो vocal cord होता है, above the vocal cord, that area is supplied by internal laryngeal nerve. So that particular area will not have any sensation. Okay, so that is the important clinical significance of this pyriform fossa. And another important clinical significance is there, not clinical significance, which I have mentioned earlier. It is also called as smuggler's fossa. Okay, why it is called as smuggler's fossa? Sometimes it is deepened artificially using lead bombs to hide precious materials such as diamonds. Okay, it was done. Nowadays cannot be done. Okay. That's why it is also called as smuggler's fossa. Important features of the which part of the pharynx? Laryngopharynx. That also the lateral wall of the laryngopharynx. Okay. So that is all about the features. Okay, and along with that the divisions of the pharynx. Next, do you remember in the last class I have told you that pharynx is a tubular structure. Pharynx is a tubular structure. So you can take the TS. So if you take TS of the pharynx, what you can see? Any tubular structure, if you take TS or if you take LS, what you can see? You can see the layers. Do you remember the blood vessels? Histology of blood vessels? Tunica intima, tunica media, tunica adventitia. What are these things? These are the layers of blood vessel, right? Blood vessels are also tubular in nature. So this pharynx is also tubular, but the dimensions are not uniform, but still it is tubular structure. So if you take the section, then what you can expect? You can expect to see the layers. So layers, how they are defined? From interior to exterior, or from external layer to the internal layer, right? If you remember the layers of the eyeball which we have studied, in the similar way in case of pharynx also we have to study the layers. So how to study the layers? From the internal layer to the external layer, right? So different layers are present in the pharynx. So what are those layers in the structure of the pharynx? So first you can see mucous membrane is there. Okay, mucous membrane or also called as mucous hood, then submucosa, pharyngobasilar fascia also called as pharyngeal aponeurosis, then muscular hood, very important. Okay, where two different groups of muscles are there, which are arranged in internal layer and external layer. Okay, and then the buccopharyngeal fascia or loose alveolar sheath. These are the layers. Okay, so please keep that in mind. In pharynx, if the question comes from the subdivisions of the pharynx along with the features, then you don't have to mention this part. Okay, you have to write only about the boundaries of the subdivision and the contents. Along with that, the features. Okay. Now, if the question comes from the structure of the pharynx, okay, at that time you have to write this particular part. So don't get confused. I have seen when the question is given that write about the structure of the pharynx along with the diagram, student you have to write about the oropharynx, nasopharynx, oropharynx, laryngopharynx. No, you should not write that. Structure of the pharynx means the layers of the pharynx. Is it clear? Don't make that mistake. Okay. So these are the layers. Now here you can see the diagram. So first ये देखो mucosa है. Okay. After that submucosa is there. Okay. Actually the submucosal layer which is present, that is the loose connective tissue, that gets modified to form this pharyngobasilar fascia. Okay. Means that is derived from the submucosa. Deep to that. Okay. Deep to that, you can see the pharyngobasilar fascia. So this is the pharyngobasilar fascia. After that, you are getting the muscle layer. Okay, so two different groups of muscles are there, which are present in the interior layer and the exterior layer. Okay, so two different groups of muscles are there. And that also, can you guess how many muscles will be there in the pharynx? Yes, very good. 6. Okay, 3 pairs of internal, 3 pairs of external. So total how many pairs? 6 pairs of muscles are there. Okay. After that, you can see the most important part is the venous plexus. Along with that, pharyngeal plexus of nerves are also placed, and the outermost layer is the buccopharyngeal fascia. Okay. So which is the innermost layer? Here, which is the innermost layer? We have studied GIT. GIT का innermost layer कौन सा होता है? हाँ, तो which is the innermost layer over here? हाँ, तो why you have to think so much? Common sense. Okay, mucosa will be the innermost layer, right? तो now next question is mucosa में क्या रहता है? What is present in the mucosa? In GIT, you have studied the microscopic structure of GIT, right? Mucosa में क्या रहता है? Lining epithelium. So here also you will be getting the lining epithelium. Okay, just apply common sense. You can write. It's not that difficult. Every time, don't try to by heart everything. Not possible. Okay. Now, one specialty of the mucosa is in this particular layer, you will be getting some amount of elastic tissue. Okay. Next, in mucosa mainly will be getting the lining epithelium. Now, can anyone tell me what will be the lining epithelium? Now, here lining epithelium means lining epithelium is continuing with the oral cavity. Lining epithelium is continuing with the nasal cavity, and the lining epithelium is present in the laryngopharynx also. Okay, so all the part it will be stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium, except the nasopharynx. Nasopharynx में कौन सा epithelium रहेगा? Respiratory epithelium. Okay, that is the only difference. Okay, so I hope it is clear about the mucosa. So as you can see in the mucosa, mucous membrane lining the pharynx consists of considerable amount of elastic tissue, and if you see the lining epithelium, it is lined by stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium, except the nasopharynx. Nasopharynx में कौन सा lining epithelium रहता है? Which lining epithelium? Respiratory epithelium. Okay. So these are the areas where you can expect short question. जो MCQ में question आता है, okay, these are the areas from which MCQ questions are asked. Next is the pharyngobasilar fascia. Okay, so next to the mucosa, actually submucosa modify होता है to form the pharyngobasilar fascia. Okay, so if you see the pharyngobasilar fascia, it is present between the fibrous sheet of internal to the pharyngeal muscle. Okay, so in deep to the pharyngeal muscle, a fibrous sheet is present. It is called as pharyngobasilar fascia, or also called as pharyngeal aponeurosis. Now, what it does, there are some areas where this particular fascia is very thick. For example, just below the base of the skull and the superior constrictor muscle. Okay, superior constrictor is a muscle of the pharynx. Okay, the superior constrictor muscle and the base of the skull, in between them the gap is filled by this pharyngobasilar fascia. Okay, so gap between the upper border of the constrictor, superior constrictor and the base of the skull, okay, that is filled by this pharyngobasilar fascia where it is very thick. Next, when it goes, so this is superior aspect. Next, when it goes posteriorly, okay, at that time also it is very thick and it is forming the pharyngeal raphe, which is a fibrous band present on the midline of the pharyngeal wall. That also on the posterior aspect. Why? Because the pharyngeal muscles होता है, they will go and attach into the pharyngeal raphe. Okay, so that's why pharyngeal raphe is very important, and it is forming this pharyngobasilar fascia or the aponeurosis on the posterior aspect. It is again getting thick and forming the pharyngeal raphe. Okay. Next, it is having many superior attachment. If you see, it is attached to the basio-occiput, petrous part of the temporal bone, auditory tube, posterior border of the medial pterygoid plate and pterygomandibular raphe. So these are the superior attachment. Now inferiorly, no such attachments are present. Inferiorly, it is lost into the deep muscles of the neck. Okay, so that is the pharyngobasilar fascia. Okay. Next is the muscular cord. Okay, here you can see the muscular cord. So in muscular cord, how it is arranged in case of pharynx, as I said, two sets of muscles are there. Okay, internal and external. So the outer layer, here you can see three pairs of circular muscles are there, and these are called as constrictor muscle. तो जो pharynx होता है, उसमें जो muscles रहता है, how they are arranged? They are arranged in two layers, outer layer and inner layer. How the muscles of the outer layer are present? They are arranged circularly, and these are called as constrictor muscle. Okay, and next if you see the internal layer of muscle, again three pairs, and these are called as longitudinal muscles. So total how many pairs are there? Okay, so total how many pairs are there? 6 pairs. How they are arranged? See, it's written, देख के बोलो, how they are arranged. Outer layer and inner layer. Outer layer muscles are called as constrictor muscles. Okay, how is the arrangement? Circular. Inner layer muscle, how is the arrangement? Longitudinally. That's why they are called as longitudinal muscles. Okay, next layer is the buccopharyngeal fascia, the outermost layer. So this particular fascia is covering the pharyngeal muscles, mainly the constrictor muscles. Okay. Now when they goes anteriorly, at that time what happens? They are covering the buccinator muscle. That's why the name is the buccopharyngeal fascia. Okay. Now when it is going anteriorly, extending, it has to cross the pterygomandibular raphe, and then it is covering the buccinator muscle. Okay. Now this particular buccopharyngeal fascia is best developed in the upper part of the pharynx, okay, where it is well developed, and on the upper border of the superior constrictor, it blends with the pharyngobasilar fascia. Okay, so both the fascia just above the superior constrictor, they will blend with each other. Now if you see, in between the buccopharyngeal fascia and the muscular cord, what is present? The pharyngeal venous plexus and pharyngeal plexus of nerves are present. Okay. Next, as I had mentioned that two different groups of muscles are present. How they are arranged? They are arranged in outer layer and inner layer. Okay. So what are the name of the muscles which are present in the outer layer? Constrictor muscles. Okay. Why constrictor? Actually they are arranged circularly. Okay. And if you see the arrangement, they are overlapping one over another from below. It means suppose one group of muscle, then another group of muscle is there. Okay, so this one group of muscle is overlapped by the another group of muscle from downwards. Okay, if you see the arrangement, just see the diagram. If you see the arrangement, it appears as you have kept the flower pots, okay, one over another. I hope you have seen flower pots. Okay, so take small 3 flower pots, put one over another, it will appear like this. Okay, so these are the arrangement of the constrictor muscles of the pharynx. Okay, how many constrictor muscles are there? 3 constrictor muscles. What are the name of this constrictor muscle? Superior constrictor, middle constrictor and inferior constrictor muscles. Right? I hope you can see in the diagram. Okay. Next, if any muscle is there, and these are skeletal muscles by the way. So if any skeletal muscles are there, what you have to do? We have to study the origin, we have to study the insertion, we have to study the action, and then we have to study the nerve supply as usual. Okay. Now from the diagram, can you tell me what will be the origin? The superior constrictor, if you see the shape of the superior constrictor, it is quadrilateral shaped. Okay, it is quadrilateral shaped. If you see the origin, from here you can see the origin. So origin mainly you can see from the pterygoid hemulus, which is a part of medial pterygoid plate. Though you have studied the norma basilis, you know what is pterygoid plate. Right? You have studied norma basilis. You have seen the sphenoid bone also. Okay? So these are the parts of sphenoid bone only. So this is one origin. Next you can see the origin from the pterygomandibular raphe, then from the mylohyoid line of the mandible, okay, and some part from the tongue itself on the lateral aspect. So these are the origin of the superior constrictor muscle. Now what will be the insertion? तो insertion always keep that in mind. जो constrictor muscle से ऐसे origin होगा from the anterior aspect, and then it will go to the posteriorly where it is attached to the pharyngeal raphe, okay, which is present posteriorly. That will be the insertion of the pharyngeal muscle, mainly about the constrictor. Okay, so here also you can see it is going posteriorly, okay, and then it will be attached to the pharyngeal raphe. Okay, and along with that it is also attached to the basiocciput, pharyngeal tubercle of the skull and the pharyngeal raphe. So these are the points of attachment for this superior constrictor muscle. Next, below the superior constrictor muscle, here you can see this is the middle constrictor muscle. ठीक है, तो middle constrictor muscle का origin कहाँ से होगा? As you can see the lower part of the stylohyoid ligament, and then you can see the hyoid bone, greater cornea and lesser cornea of the hyoid bone, and then where it will go and attach? It will go and attach to the median fibrous raphe or pharyngeal raphe, okay, which is on the posterior aspect. ठीक है. Next, and this is fan shaped. Next, if you go, this is the inferior constrictor. Now, inferior constrictor is again divided into 2 parts. जो inferior constrictor है उसका 2 part है. As you can see, this is the thyrapharyngeus part and this is the cricopharyngeus part. Okay, so this is the superior constrictor, this is the middle constrictor, and this is the inferior constrictor. Now, inferior constrictor is having 2 parts. Okay, upper part is called thyrapharyngeus, lower part is called as cricopharyngeus. Okay, why it is thyrapharyngeus? Because you can see it is arising from the oblique line of the lamina of thyroid cartilage. Okay, in thyroid cartilage, we will be studying about the cartilages of the neck, where you have to study the thyroid cartilage. So thyroid cartilage का जो lateral aspect है, there is a oblique line, or also called as lamina. From there, you can see the inferior constrictor arising. So though this part is arising from the thyroid, that's why it is also called as thyrapharyngeus part of the inferior constrictor. Okay. Next, a small tendinous band is also present. From there also it is arising. Okay, it is getting origin. Next, you can see small part is the cricopharyngeus part. Okay, which is arising from the cricoid cartilage, which is present just below the thyroid cartilage. That's why it is called as cricopharyngeus part. Okay. Now, while discussing about the applied anatomy, we'll see that though these two particular parts, okay, origin is different, now here the nerve supply is also different, okay, and due to that there is a very important clinical significance related to this. That I am not discussing now, don't want to mix, okay. So in the applied part we will discuss. Just keep that in mind. दो अलग अलग पार्ट इंफीरियर कंस्ट्रिक्टर का, थाइरोफेरिंजियस एंड क्रिकोफेरिंजियस, एंड नर्व सप्लाई इज आल्सो डिफरेंट, ओके. So these are the which muscles? Constrictor muscles, okay. Next here you can see which muscles are this? Longitudinal muscles, okay. So where they are present? They are present in the inner aspect, okay. So here you can see these are the constrictor muscle and these are the longitudinal muscle. So how many longitudinal muscles are there? Three pairs of longitudinal muscle, okay. So the names are, you can see this is the stylopharyngeus muscle, this is the sulfingopharyngeus muscle, and this is the palatopharyngeus muscle, okay. Three pairs of longitudinal muscles are present. तो stylopharyngeus का मतलब क्या है? It will arise from which part? Styloid process. As you can see, this is the styloid process, okay, medial aspect of the styloid process. And you can see they will go and attach where? Into the oblique line of the thyroid cartilage, okay, posterior border of the lamina of the thyroid cartilage. That is the point of attachment, or you can say point of insertion. Posterior border of the lamina of thyroid cartilage. Posterior border of the lamina of the thyroid cartilage. Next you can see this is the sulfingopharyngeus muscle. This is arising from the lower aspect of the cartilaginous part of the auditory tube, okay, and it is inserting same into the posterior border of the lamina of thyroid cartilage, okay. Next you can see the palatopharyngeus. So this is the palatopharyngeus. तो palatopharyngeus का दो स्लिप होता है in the origin, anterior and posterior, and from where they are arising? They are arising from the palatine aponeurosis. Palatopharyngeus is a muscle of soft palatal. Already we have discussed. Okay, from there it is arising, and you can see again it is inserting where? Into the posterior border of the lamina of thyroid cartilage. But in this case, this particular muscle is also inserted into the lateral wall of the pharynx, okay. So these are the origin and insertion of two sets of muscle. That is, the outer one is the constrictor and inner one is the longitudinal muscles. Now the question is, we have discussed total 6 pairs of muscle, okay. We have discussed origin, insertion, everything. Now what will be the action? अगर कोई muscle attached रहता है, उसका actions रहेगा, right? So what do you think? What will be the actions of these muscles? First, what about the constrictor muscle? Constrictor muscle का action क्या होगा? See, constrictor muscle का action, it helps in deglutition or it helps in swallowing. Okay. So constrictor muscles, the main function is whatever you swallow, during the swallowing it helps. Okay. It will constrict, and this constriction relaxation will act as a peristalsis movement which will push the bolus towards the esophagus. That is the main function of the constrictor muscles, okay. Now here you can see the list of the constrictor muscles, okay. So here you can see the name of the muscle, origin, insertion, nerve supply and action, okay. Nerve supply, I am coming into the nerve supply, don't worry. And here you can see these are the longitudinal muscles of the pharynx, okay. Now next is the functions. So two groups of muscle, two different functions. If you see the constrictor muscle, they will contract involuntarily. When they contract involuntarily, what they will do in a sequence known as peristalsis, which will push the food down from the oral cavity to the esophagus, which takes place during the time of deglutition or during the time of swallowing. Okay. Next is the longitudinal muscle. So here you can see the longitudinal muscles. These longitudinal muscles, what they will do? They will shorten the pharynx, and that is required during swallowing and speaking. Okay. And along with that, they will elevate the larynx, and they will shorten the pharynx, which is required during the time of deglutition and during the time of speech production or during the time of talking. Okay. So these are the functions of the pharyngeal muscles. Now I have mentioned about the pharyngeal raphe. Do you remember? median fibrous raphe or pharyngeal raphe. So this is the median fibrous raphe of the pharynx. Okay, this is the median fibrous raphe of the pharynx. Okay, so these are the muscles of the pharynx. So how many groups of muscles? Two groups of muscles. Okay, in each group three sets of muscle, or you can say three pairs of muscles are present. So we have seen the origin, insertion, along with that the action of those muscles. Okay, next there is another part related to these muscles, that is the structure passing through the constrictor. So how many constrictor muscles are there? Three pairs of constrictor muscle. Okay, that means right side में भी three muscles रहेगा, left side में भी three muscles रहेगा. Right, now in between these three muscles there are some spaces. Okay, and few structures are traveling through that space. Either they are going inside the pharynx or they are coming out of the pharynx. Okay, now pharynx is a tube, like tubular structure. So it needs blood supply, it needs nerve supply. So what should be the entry point? How the nerve will enter inside the pharynx, or how the blood vessel will enter inside the pharynx? कैसे होगा? For that the muscles which are present, three muscles, उसके बीच में gap रहता है. Through those gap, the structures either going in or coming out of the pharynx. Okay, so we have to know about the gaps in between the constrictor muscles. Okay, so here you can see there are several gaps exist in between the folds of the pharyngeal constrictor of the muscles, which allow the structure either to enter or to exit the pharynx. Okay, so some structure will go in and some structure will come out from the pharynx. Now first you have to know what are the gaps. Okay, जो gap है वो कहाँ पे रहता है, and then what are the structures entering, because those structures are also very specific. Here also you can't mix things. Okay, so what is the first gap? As you can see, first gap is present in between the base of the skull and upper concave border of the superior constrictor muscle, also called as sinus of Morgagni. Okay, the base of the skull and upper constrictor muscle के बीच में जो gap है, that is called as space of Morgagni. Okay, so that is the first gap. Second gap is in between the superior constrictor and middle constrictor. Third one is between the middle constrictor and inferior constrictor. Okay, and the last one is between the lower border of the inferior constrictor and the esophagus, or the tracheoesophageal groove. That is the last space. So these are some spaces which are present in the pharynx through which the structures are entering or coming out from the pharynx. Okay, now each and every gap different structures are there. Okay, so this is the list of the gap and these are the list of the structures. Okay, now in the list of the structures, as you can see, first is the auditory tube. Okay, first gap, then levator villi palatini muscle, ascending palatine artery and palatine branch of the ascending pharyngeal artery. Okay, from the first gap. Second, you can see only two structures are there, stylopharyngeus muscle and glossopharyngeal nerve. From the third one, the internal laryngeal nerve and superior laryngeal vessels. And from the last one, recurrent laryngeal nerve and inferior laryngeal vessels. Okay, let me show you the diagram. Yeah, so here you can see two diagrams are there. Now in both the diagrams, similar things are shown, but in this diagram you can see that these are the structures which are going in between the constrictors, or you can say in between the spaces of the constrictor muscle, and here you can see the space. So see, this is the first space, or also called as space of Morgagni. Okay, between the base of the skull and the superior constrictor. This is the second space. Okay, so this is the second space in between the superior constrictor and the middle constrictor. Is the second space. This is the third space between the middle and inferior constrictor, and this is the fourth space. Okay, इसके नीचे क्या रहेगा? Esophagus will be there. So between the esophagus and the inferior constrictor, this is the last space. Okay, so through this space you can see so many structures are passing. तो जो 3 मार्क्स का क्वेश्चन आता है इन सेकेंड इंटरनल एग्जाम, यू हैव नोटिस क्वेश्चंस आर देयर. ओके, सो फ्रॉम हियर यू कैन एक्सपेक्ट 3 मार्क्स क्वेश्चन that name the structures from the passing through the gaps of constrictor muscles. Okay, Here also gaps are specific, structures are also specific. Okay. So from the first gap, as you can see, auditory tube is passing, along with that levator villi palatini. Can anyone tell me this levator villi palatini muscle where we have studied? Yes, in soft palate. Okay. Next you can see ascending palatine artery. This is also passing through next gap. Second gap, only two structures are passing. What are these two structures? Glossopharyngeal nerve, okay, and stylopharyngeus muscle. Okay. After that, from the third gap, you can see two important structures. Okay, that is the internal laryngeal nerve and superior laryngeal artery. So internal laryngeal nerve, already I told you, it is a branch of internal laryngeal nerve. Kiska branch hai? Is a branch of vagus. Okay, it also superior laryngeal nerve divides into internal and external. So this is the internal laryngeal nerve, completely sensory in nature, which supplies which part of the larynx? Supraglottic part of the larynx. Okay. Next, if you see, along with the internal laryngeal nerve, we are getting the superior laryngeal artery. Now this is also supplying the blood to the supraglottic part of the larynx, and this is a branch of superior thyroid artery. Okay, it's a branch of superior thyroid artery. Superior thyroid artery is a branch of first branch of external carotid artery. Next, you can see last gap is in between the inferior constrictor and the esophagus. Two structures are passing. Okay, what are those structures? Recurrent laryngeal nerve and inferior laryngeal artery. Inferior laryngeal artery is a branch of inferior thyroid artery. Recurrent laryngeal nerve is a branch of vagus only. Okay, recurrent laryngeal nerve is very important because it is supplying most of the muscles of the larynx. Okay, not all, most of the muscles of the larynx. Okay, so while discussing about the larynx, you will come to know about the recurrent laryngeal nerve. Okay, so all the structures are extremely important. Okay, so that is all about the structures passing through the constrictor muscle. Now next part is the nerve supply of the pharynx. So I hope you have observed a pattern of the nerve supply which we have started from the tongue. What are the points? Yes, first is the motor supply, then secretomotor, then sensory. Okay? These three things are present over here also. So motor supply means it will supply which part? Motor का मतलब M for M motor, M muscles. Okay, so which muscles will be supplied? Muscles of the pharynx. Just now we have discussed 6 pairs of muscles are there. Okay, so that's why the first part will be the motor part, then will be the sensory part, and then will be the secretomotor part. Okay, so these three parts, whenever you are writing about the nerve supply, please try to segregate it and then write. Okay. Now, in the pharynx, things are not that simple. First of all, you have to know how the pharyngeal plexus of nerves are formed. Okay, so you can see pharynx is supplied by pharyngeal plexus of nerve. Okay, and chiefly it is formed on the superior constrictor muscle. Actually, जो muscle group है and the macropharyngeal fascia, दोनों के बीच में ये plexus रहता है, especially on the middle constrictor. Now, the question is how the pharyngeal plexus is formed. Okay, so three different nerves are there, as you can see. Pharyngeal branch of the vagus, which are carrying fibers from cranial accessory or the 11th cranial nerve. Then pharyngeal branch of glossopharyngeal and pharyngeal branch of superior cervical sympathetic ganglion. Okay, so these branches will come and they will form the pharyngeal plexus, and from pharyngeal plexus the pharynx is supplied. Okay, now so different aspects of the pharynx are there. For example, muscles are there, glands are there, taste sensations are there. Okay, so the nerve supply will be different. So what about the muscles? All the muscles of the pharynx, as you can see, all the muscles of the pharynx are supplied by cranial accessory through the branches of vagus. Okay, cranial root of accessory through the branches of vagus, all the muscle except stylopharyngeus. Okay, that is supplied by the glossopharyngeal nerve. So see, from the tongue itself, I am repeating this line. All the muscles of this area is supplied by this nerve except this muscle which is supplied by this nerve, right? So repeatedly I am telling you guys to note it down. I don't know whether you have noted or not. Okay, anyway, so all the muscles are supplied by cranial accessory through the branches of vagus except the stylopharyngeus, which is supplied by glossopharyngeal nerve. Okay. Next, some additional nerve supply is also present for the inferior constrictor, that is from the internal laryngeal nerve, from the external laryngeal nerve and recurrent laryngeal nerve. Okay, external laryngeal nerve and recurrent laryngeal nerve. These are the additional, you can say, nerve supply which are provided to the inferior constrictor, because inferior constrictor का दो part होता है. One is thylopharyngeus, another one is retropharyngeus. Okay. Next is the sensory supply. Okay, so sensory supply again it is of two types. What are these? Taste sensation and general sensation. Two types of sensations are there. Okay. Now, as you can see, again it is different. Nasopharynx by the pharyngeal branch of pterygopalatine ganglion. Okay, which are the fibers of maxillary division of the trigeminal nerve. तो जो सेंसरी पार्ट है फॉर nasopharynx, it is mainly done by the maxillary division of the trigeminal nerve. Okay. Next, oropharynx by glossopharyngeal nerve and laryngopharynx by the internal laryngeal nerve. So three divisions of pharynx we have discussed: nasopharynx, oropharynx, laryngopharynx. तीनों का जो general sensation है, the nerves are different. Okay. For nasopharynx, as I have said, the branches are coming from the maxillary division of the trigeminal nerve. Okay, that also by pharyngeal branch of the pterygopalatine ganglion. Then oropharynx by glossopharyngeal nerve and laryngopharynx by internal laryngeal nerve. Okay. Next, taste sensation. Okay, from the valvula and epiglottic area through the internal laryngeal nerve of the vagus. That is the taste sensation. That also you have to differentiate whenever you are writing about the sensory nerve supply, because your taste sensation hota hai, that is a special type of sensation which have to be written separately. Okay. Last is the parasympathetic secretomotor fibers. So secretomotor fibers for the different glands which are present in the different parts of the pharynx. Okay. So for that the fibers where will come? Do you remember the secretomotor fibers? What are the parts of the secretomotor fibers? Have you studied about the pterygopalatine ganglion? Have you studied about the pterygopalatine ganglion? I know you have studied pterygopalatine ganglion. If pterygopalatine fossa is done, then you will be studying about the pterygopalatine ganglion. So please keep that in mind. See, again, I think this is the third time I am repeating this. Don't feel like repeating every time. Any secretomotor fibers, okay, in most of the cases, the origin will be from superior salivatory nucleus. From there, the fibers for this pharynx, how they are coming? They are coming through median nerve or nerve to pterygoid canal, and then they will rely on the pterygopalatine ganglion. That is the preganglionic part. From the pterygopalatine ganglion, the fibers which are coming out, those will be the postganglionic fibers. So these are very small branches. Okay, pharyngeal branches are there, lacrymal branches are there. Okay, those will go and supply the adjacent structure. Okay, so that is the secretomotor fibers. Okay. And as I said in the last class, जो pterygopalatine ganglion होता है, it is one of the largest parasympathetic ganglia of our body. Okay, please study the pterygopalatine ganglion, very important. Okay, next is the blood supply. Okay, so in the blood supply, it's very simple. Mostly it will be supplied by the branches of external carotid artery, but exactly you have to know which one. So the most important branch is the ascending pharyngeal branch, okay, which is a branch of the external carotid artery. Next, here you can see some branches, ascending palatine, okay, and tonsillar branches of the facial artery, and dorsal lingual branch of the lingual artery. Okay, ultimately they are branches of external carotid only, okay, but not the direct branch. From where they are coming, that you have to mention. Okay, so these are the arteries which are supplying the pharynx. Okay. Next, veins. So veins, what it will do? They will form a venous plexus, and that venous plexus is draining the pharynx. They are draining the soft palate. Okay. As you can see, the veins forming the plexus on the posterolateral aspect of the pharynx. Pharynx is the posterolateral aspect. There will be getting the venous plexus. Now this venous plexus, they will drain the soft palate and the prevertebral region also, and ultimately they will drain into the internal jugular vein and the facial vein. Here is the diagram. In this diagram you can see the blood vessels supplying the pharynx. You can see the ascending pharyngeal artery, you can see the ascending palatine artery, tonsillar artery and lingual artery. Okay, so these are the main branches which are supplying the pharynx. Please note that pharynx is a long structure, approximately 15 centimeter. So only one source will not be enough to supply the entire pharynx. Okay, so the main one is ascending pharyngeal branch, which is a branch of external carotid artery. So only one branch is not sufficient. That's why additional blood supply or other branches are also there. Okay, which is shown over here. Here also you can see the ascending palatine artery. Okay, and you can see the lingual artery also, dorsal branch of the lingual artery, which is supplying the pharynx. Okay. Next, the lymphatic drainage. In lymphatic drainage, it is drained by upper and lower deep cervical lymph nodes. Okay, and through the retropharyngeal lymph nodes. Okay. Now, the most important part of the pharynx, okay, is the pharyngeal spaces. Anyone, have you heard about the pharyngeal space? I hope you have studied the facial spaces of the neck. Anyway, in case of pharyngeal spaces, two important spaces are there. That is retropharyngeal space and parapharyngeal space. Retropharyngeal space means the space which is situated behind the pharynx. So, जो pharynx है and vertebral column है, in between this a small space is there. That is called retropharyngeal space. Okay, and on the either side of the pharynx, okay, a space is there situated on the either side, and that is called as parapharyngeal space. Okay, so two spaces are there: retropharyngeal space situated behind the pharynx and parapharyngeal space situated on the either side of the pharynx. Okay, so we have to discuss about these two spaces, extremely important, and they are having very important clinical significance. So what we have to know? We have to know the boundaries of those spaces, from where to where this space extend, and then what is the important clinical significance, and lastly what are the contents of this space. Okay, space है मतलब क्या? Something will be there in that particular space. So what exactly is present in those space, that also we have to know. Okay. During mediastinum, do you remember that some fascia is responsible for spread of the infection from neck to the mediastinum? When you have studied the mediastinum, I don't know whether you have studied that part or not. Okay, so here we will be studying this particular point. Okay, though these spaces are extending up to the mediastinum, superior mediastinum. Okay, so any abscess, any infection in the neck region can extend up to the mediastinum. Okay, so that will be continued in the next class. Okay, thank you.